We begin this Thursday morning with the Trump transition and the nominations that have stunned even Republicans. We now know the GOP will have full control of Congress when the president-elect begins his second term in January. It's because NBC News projects Republicans will maintain control of the House of Representatives for another 2 years with another thin margin. The Senate majority was called for the GOP last week. For Mr. Trump, having control of both chambers will give him broad political power to advance his second-term agenda. In the Senate, South Dakota Republican Senator John Thune was elected majority leader. He replaces longtime Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell. As for the president-elect Trump, well, he met with President Biden in the White House, a cordial affair. It was their first in-person meeting since their debate over the summer. They spoke about having a smooth transition over the next 2 months.
Looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need.
Politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get.
President-elect Trump also named more people he intends to nominate for cabinet positions. 2 surprise picks are making headlines. Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz as Attorney General and former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. We have team coverage ahead this hour as the levers of power in Washington now firmly in the hands of Republicans. Let's begin with NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns, who's covering the Trump transition. Dasha, good morning. Busy first week for the Trump transition as the president-elect has named several people to join his administration. Okay. One of those names that is standing out, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz is his pick for Attorney General. That caught people in the president's own party by surprise. Gaetz has no experience as a prosecutor, so now he's Mr. Trump's choice to lead a Justice Department that once investigated him for allegations of sex trafficking, but ultimately closed the case. Here's the question, Dasha. Why?
It is a question that a lot of folks in Washington are asking right now, Joe. Look, this is someone who has been a loyal foot soldier for former President Trump in Congress. Steve Bannon, a Trump ally, said he will hit the Justice Department with a, quote, blowtorch. That's really why. No secret that Mr. Trump and the Justice Department have been at odds. He has long talked about completely remaking the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, these agencies, and Gaetz is an agent who could do just that. By the way, Joe, you mentioned that investigation. He had also been under investigation by the House Ethics Committee, and that investigation was ongoing, and he's now resigned from Congress. The reactions to this have just been extraordinary. It is sending shockwaves through the Justice Department, through Washington in general. People, sources are telling our reporters that he is, quote, uniquely unqualified, saying that this is unimaginable, saying that they're struggling to find words. I mean, this is really shaking folks.
And Dasha, we'll dig into some more of those reactions in just a moment. Let's talk about Tulsi Gabbard, President-elect Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence. She's been previously accused of amplifying Russian propaganda. She's never worked in the intelligence world. So what does the president-elect think that Gabbard brings to the table? And just what is some of the reaction to her selection?
Yeah, another pretty controversial pick here, Joe. She is someone who has transformed really over the last few years of watching her in the public eye. She was a Democrat, then independent, and now she says she is fully committed to the Republican Party because of President-elect Trump. She's become very close with his allies, people like Charlie Kirk, who's been a big mover and shaker in getting the youth vote, especially getting young men over to the Republican Party and to former President Trump. And the fact that she did abandon the Democratic Party and has been so fiercely loyal to President-elect Trump, that's a big reason why she was selected for this role. But again, someone that does not have the experience necessary for an agency for a role that oversees 18 intelligence agencies and $70 million.
Dasha, it was a big day yesterday in the White House for the incoming and outgoing presidents. Just walk us through that face-to-face meeting and what more we're learning about this transfer of power that's now well underway.
Well, we were told that President-elect Trump came to the White House with a list of questions for President Biden that President Biden tried to answer. Their meeting was nearly 2 hours long. It was productive, we are told, and you saw some of those optics in the view of the public there, sitting in front of a fireplace, cordial, respectful, to the surprise of some, given their bitter relationship in the past. But they both have said that they are committed to a smooth transfer of power, Joe.
All right, Dasha Burns kicking us off this hour. Thank you so much. As promised, let's focus more on President-elect Trump's controversial decision to nominate Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz for the role of Attorney General, a choice that is already getting pushback from within his own party. Some Republicans already speaking out, a sign that the MAGA loyalist could face challenges during the confirmation process in the Senate. Here's what Alaska Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski had to say about the choice.
I don't think it's a serious nomination for the Attorney General. We need to have a serious Attorney General, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to consider somebody that is serious. This one was not on my bingo card.
Gaetz was the subject of an investigation by the House Ethics Committee over allegations of sexual misconduct and illicit drug use. When Gaetz resigned from his House seat last night to prepare for this confirmation process, it essentially ended that probe. Let's get more from NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. So, Ryan, if he's confirmed, Gaetz would be running a department that once investigated him over allegations he was involved in a scheme related to sex trafficking. Gaetz said he was innocent. In the end, he was not charged. Shortly after that probe ended last year, Gaetz called for federal agencies to be abolished, including the DOJ. Let's listen.
I don't care if it takes every second of our time and every ounce of our energy. We either get this government back on our side or we defund and get rid of, abolish the FBI, CDC, ATF, DOJ, every last one of them if they do not come to heel.
So, Ryan, you and your team have been gathering some rather blunt reactions from within the GOP and among federal law enforcement. Tell us what you're hearing and just what is Gaetz's reputation around Congress, around Washington?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shock, obviously, within DOJ if this were to come about. I mean, right, we have a criminal defendant, Donald Trump, who is retaking the White House. So the idea that, you know, about as close to and up to the line as a theoretical, almost criminal defendant could be in Matt Gaetz as Attorney General kind of, you know, makes sense in terms of they're on the same wavelength. Both of them have these deep grievances against the Justice Department and against the professionals within DOJ who, you know, have been doing their job and sort of are working with one hand behind their back in a lot of ways because they are unable to push back at a lot of these lies that folks like Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz have been spreading about the Justice Department for years now and attacking directly Justice Department employees who really are on just a different playing field and can't operate by the same rules, really no rules, that Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump have been operating from. They are able to attack them, make baseless claims about them, lie about January 6th, lie about the handling of those cases, lie about what happened on January 6th itself, lie about DOJ employees, lie about FBI employees without any real repercussions. Whereas, you know, within DOJ, there are a set of rules and here are the set of guidelines that you have to work within. And you can't just be this sort of chaos agent and spread whatever sort of lies that you want. You actually have to stick to the facts and stick to the truth and bring cases forward when there's enough evidence to bring them. And, you know, that was the tricky thing with Matt Gaetz's case there is, you know, they decided that there was not beyond a reasonable doubt that they could bring a case against him. But in Donald Trump's case, they said that there was, and a federal grand jury agreed with them at returning that indictment against Donald Trump. That is, of course, you know, DOA as soon as Donald Trump takes the White House and, you know, make sure that there will be no criminal accountability for Donald Trump's efforts to unlawfully overthrow the results of the 2020 election.
Some of the reactions you and your team have gathered from senior Justice Department officials speaking anonymously. OMG, truly stunning. Someone called it insane, also laughable, we heard. So when we think about how the person in this role will impact President-elect Trump and his agenda, what are some of the things that Matt Gaetz would be overseeing as Attorney General if he's confirmed by the Senate? What kind of background does a typical AG candidate have?
Yeah, not Matt Gaetz's background as the typical AG candidate has. They have professional experience within the Justice Department, some experience, in federal courts. Typically, people who've been arrested for DUIs aren't at the top of the list necessarily. So this is, a much different world that we're walking into. And I should say, he's also pretty progressive. If you wanted to pick something he's pretty progressive on, it's drugs, right? He's in favor of marijuana legalization, which has been something that's only slowly sort of gotten closer to, DOJ sort of pulled back on some more of those marijuana cases. But, there's a really wide berth that the Justice Department really has in impacting every part of American life. And so, you don't want to understate the impact that someone like a Matt Gaetz could have if he were indeed to take over the Justice Department.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's take a closer look at one of the other big stories coming out of Washington. South Dakota Republican Senator John Thune will be the new majority leader of the U.S. Senate. Thune was elected by secret ballot yesterday. He'll replace Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell, who's stepping down after a record 18 years as leader. In the lower chamber, NBC News is now projecting that Republicans have won control of the House of Representatives. That solidifies the GOP's grip on Washington with full control of Congress and the White House. NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin is here with more on this. Julie, good morning. So we know Senator Thune is a longtime member of Congress, first elected to the Senate 20 years ago. What is important to know just about his political track record and how he compares with Mitch McConnell? And does he have a good working relationship with the president-elect?
Well, he's been working overtime, Joe, to make sure he has a good relationship with the president-elect. That's because, like McConnell, Thune had a turbulent, rocky relationship throughout Donald Trump's first presidency. When he left the White House, Thune actually vied for Tim Scott to be president this time around instead of Trump, of course, then supporting Trump ultimately when he became the nominee of the party. But look, McConnell never said publicly who he supported to succeed him, but you can bet that it was John Thune out of those three men. This is somebody who, again, in addition to breaking with Trump in the past, has supported aid to Ukraine, is widely respected on both sides of the aisle, is not really a flamethrower, has, again, a good working relationship with pretty much everybody in Washington. And that is part of the reason why he got elected, even though we saw that MAGA pressure campaign behind Rick Scott. And again, he's been working hard to fix that relationship with Trump, visiting him at Mar-a-Lago, having several phone calls, and Trump posted on Truth Social embracing this pick.
So, I mean, Julie, Senator Thune, he has been working toward this goal of leading Senate Republicans for a long time. Finally happens, it's his big day, and then moments later, he gets the surprise. Matt Gaetz is Trump's pick for Attorney General, Tulsi Gabbard for DNI Director. These are people now he may have to try and shepherd through the nomination process. Do we know his reaction to these choices?
Oh, yeah, the first big major test for Senate Republicans. And look, Thune had to have expected this or seen it coming. He knows the job that he signed up for. He knows exactly who Trump is. We didn't catch him after the Gaetz news came out, but he did speak about this idea of Trump's recess appointments, this threat essentially that Trump made in asking anyone who becomes the Senate Majority Leader to be open to that idea. This is something that hasn't happened since President Obama was in office. There was a gentleman's agreement between Republicans and Democrats in the Senate not to do that. That essentially means that the Senate is recessed and then Trump can push through whoever he wants without Senate confirmation. Take a listen to what Thune had to say to that idea.
What we're going to do is make sure that we are processing his nominees in a way that gets them into those positions so they can implement his agenda.
Look, Thune, Tulsi Gabbard, some of these wild card names are going to have an uphill battle to confirmation. They do have a padding, a couple of seats, even with defections that they should be able to get anybody Trump wants through. But Thune said he prefers regular order, but all options are on the table.
And Julie, as we mentioned, NBC News officially projected yesterday that Republicans will maintain control of the House. That gives Republicans an edge, a thin majority. What does that mean for the next 2 years?
Well, and speaking of Gaetz, the first reaction from Steve Scalise, who is a member of House Republican leadership, was stop taking our guys, because as you see that map on your screen, there are still a couple of races that are yet to be called. But Republicans right now, right at that 218 margin, they had about a 4 or 5 seat majority in the last 2 years. This is when they played offense because a Democrat, of course, has been in the White House. This time, Trump has a bold agenda. They want to overhaul tax policy, extending some of the Trump 2017 tax cuts. They want to change the way our southern border works, overhaul immigration policy, and end some critical federal regulations. You're going to need broad sweeping powers to make that happen. And certainly the majority they have right now in the House is very, very tight. It's why you have pushback from House Republicans on Trump taking any more of their guys into the cabinet.
Yeah, we should note it's not just Gaetz, it's Waltz, it's Stefanik, have all been tapped to be in the Trump administration. Those people have to be replaced in Congress. So that's an issue there. Julie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. President Biden is preparing to leave later today for some of his final appearances as president on the global stage. He's traveling to Peru for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. It's also known as APEC. While there, he is expected to hold talks with China's President Xi. After that, he'll head to Brazil for the G20 Leaders Summit. The meetings come amid a whole host of global crises and President-elect Trump's impending return to office. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now to talk more about all this. Monica, good morning. So we understand President Biden is going to meet with his Chinese counterpart on Saturday. What can we expect from this meeting? And just, I mean, how much of a shadow will President-elect Trump be casting here, especially when you consider his promise to impose tariffs on Chinese exports to the U.S.?
I think that's a huge part of the dynamic here, Joe, and the White House is certainly aware of that. They thought if the election had gone in a different direction and what they wanted to see happen, that this meeting would be looking very different in terms of handing off to a potential Harris administration. But of course, she lost, and now they know that Donald Trump is coming back to return to Washington and take over the White House. And so that does change some of the conversations here and what they're going to be trying to nail down. Now, this is going to be the last meeting between President Biden and President Xi. Remember, they were last together about a year ago when they had that summit in Woodside, California, and they set out on some agreements and areas of cooperation that we're told they're going to try to have a final update on, see if they can kind of commit to a couple of things that could be smoothly transitioned now to a Donald Trump administration. But there is this awareness that there's a lot there that likely could be undone and that could change. And so this is more about trying to send that message diplomatically that the U.S. is trying to maintain with not just allies, but also countries like China that they have had conflict with, certainly over the last 4 years, and where there have been a lot of tensions, but trying to highlight the fact that they've been able to simmer those to some degree. So there will be discussions of economic cooperation for sure, but also trying to strengthen the U.S. position in the Indo-Pacific overall. Joe.
From there's going to be nearly 24 world leaders at that G20 summit in Rio. That's the president's second stop. Just what's his main message going to be to leaders there as he prepares to leave office?
Yeah, and before he arrives, he's going to be making history as the first sitting president from the United States to visit the Amazon. So he's going to be doing that first as well. And then when he gets to the G20, this is a story that the president often tells, that when he first came to office in 2021, he would go to summits like this one. He would try to reassure allies and world leaders like the ones he's going to encounter here that America was back and that the world leaders would respond to him, okay, quote, but for how long? And so now this is sort of the continuation to that, which the answer is going to be, well, in the view of the Biden administration and the president, only for 4 years. So there will be conversation certainly about some concerns that some allies have expressed. But there are also allies who have certainly said that they are ready to work with Donald Trump, and they have different priorities and different things that they want to accomplish. So this is about trying to shore up this image. But in reality, we know that there's so much change coming on the global stage, and the world leaders will likely reflect that in their conversations with the president as well.
Without a doubt. All right, Monica Alba, thank you so much. Some wet weather expected on both coasts this morning, but the Northeast still not getting any of that much needed rain. More details, let's check in on your morning news now weather with meteorologist Michelle Grossman. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Yeah, unfortunately, we will not see that rain in the northeast. We do have an unsettled pattern still continuing in the west, and this is what's happening in the east. We have a cold front that's stretching from the Great Lakes through the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley down to the southeast. The problem in the northeast is we have a big area of high pressure, and it's pushing this rain down to the south. As this front moves a little bit closer, you're going to sort of see it spin and keep the northeast dry. Unfortunately, we're going to see some showers, some snow showers into northern Maine by tomorrow, but that is about it. So this is the setup here. There's that cold front, beneficial rain for parts of the Midwest, also parts of the mid-Atlantic, and this will bring heavy rain to parts of the Carolinas. We're going to see an area of low pressure form off the coast here. It's going to enforce this rain that's falling with the cold front. So we're going to see some really windy conditions too later on in the Carolinas later on tonight. But notice what happens here. We stay dry, unfortunately, throughout parts of New England and also the Northeast, much needed areas for some rain, and that's going to be the case as we go through at least the next 7 days. We're not looking at rain in the New York City area, Philadelphia area until next Wednesday. So rain for some, not all. As we go towards tomorrow, we're going to see this cold front moving off the coast, and then the winds really pick up. That's a problem because we're so dry, really low humidity, and we're going to see those winds picking up. So then once again, our fire danger really does ramp up on Friday. Taking a look at the rainfall forecast, I mentioned the heaviest rain falling throughout West Virginia into Virginia, North Carolina, and that's because we're going to see that coastal low really reinforcing the rain that is falling today. Where you see those darker colors, that's the heaviest rain expected, corresponding to 2-3 inches on the map here. And that will be today. It's going to move out by early tomorrow. The fire weather threat, mentioning this for tomorrow, so as winds ramp up as that storm system pulls away, we're going to see places from Boston and Newport, Hartford, Bridgeport, Easton, Philadelphia under the gun for some really gusty winds and really looking at the chance for some fire danger once again tomorrow. Now we have the temperatures. It is chilly outside. If you haven't been outside yet, you need the coat in parts of the mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, because we are looking at temperatures in the 40s and 50s. 50 degrees today in New York City. That's about 5 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. We're so used to those mild temperatures, so anything below average feels really chilly. Lynchburg, 48 degrees, Columbia, 57. But back to the west, behind this cold front, we are mild. We're looking at temperatures in the 50s and 60s, well above normal for this time of year. We're looking at Wichita, 63 degrees, 55 in Omaha. That will be the story as we go throughout tomorrow, keeping it warm in those spots. But notice in New York City, we're going to ramp it up to into the upper 50s, near 60. And we will keep it mild. So if you like this mild temperatures, not today, that's a chilly day. We're going to look at temperatures warming up in Philadelphia by Sunday. Also Monday, temperatures back near 70 on Monday. Unsettled west, we've been talking about this all week long. We're going to continue to talk about this because we have an atmospheric river that's moving on shore again tomorrow, unsettled once again today. The rain and snow lingering from Washington to California. We're going to see gusty winds really gusting in those mountain ranges with the snow falling. It's going to create some tricky travel today and also tomorrow.
It feels like we never do average anymore. No. It's always like way over or way under.
Overachiever, underachiever. It's never just right.
What happened to average?
Average is okay.
All right.
Look at me.
Look at us. Look, we're here. Average. Thanks, Michelle. You're above average.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.